Thank you again for you and Dr. Girami for accepting Khaneiron invitation. We're not a political or religious community. It's just educational Farsi language to the children and cultural events. And it's been working for 40 years now. Two very nice, lovely ladies that they wanted to teach the children of Iranian immigrant to Iran, started this program, teaching Farsi in their home to the kids, and then little by little went to their room up on the second floor of a 7-Eleven, and then gradually their life became more prosperous, and then they bought a little suite, and now it is in Torrance, California, which is, we call it South Bay Persian Heritage Foundation, and basically it's educational. And since COVID, we went on Zoom, and my once a month education program, which was usually inviting physicians to talk about medicine, became once a week, just because we thought COVID is going to last only 2 or 3 months. But then we're still here, and I'm doing it, and I'm glad that we're doing it in very different aspects: art, philosophy, books. And we're very happy to have you and other speakers. Let me read your bio. This is Ellen. Estilai received her bachelor degree in art from University of California at Davis, and her master degree in English language and literature from University Tehran, my favorite university in Iran. Formerly the executive director of the Riverside Art Councils and Art Councils for San Bernardino County. She has taught English in universities in Iran and California, a 3-time Pushcart Prize nominee. She has published in numerous journals and including the New California Writing in 2011, Snapdragon, Ink and Amp, Letters, Heron 3. Visual Memories and Home, Tall Grasses, Riders Guild Anthology, Shortleaf, Lady Lit Liberty, Lit Riddles and Errors, and Violet and Amp. We're very happy to have you, and I hope I pronounced everything correctly. And here we go. Floor is yours, and let's see what we are.
Thank you so much, Qudsi Khanum. I really appreciate it. I thank you for inviting me. I'm just so grateful to you and to Khaneiron for hosting this event, and also to my very good friend, Dr. Bahram Gerami, who has been a supporter of this project for so many years, and he served as the technical editor for this book. We were so lucky to have him, he's shaking his head modestly, but no, it was like a huge effort. Not once, but twice he read the whole book.
He is very modest.
He is, yes, he is. Anyway, and I want to thank the audience too for being here. It's so great to have you, and I can't wait to hear what questions you have. I'm going to read for a while. I have a few short selections from various chapters. And then I think we'll have a little musical interlude with some pictures. And then we'll open it up to Q&A, questions and answers. This book is about a very difficult period of our lives. It was, the motivation for writing it was a very traumatic experience that happened in Mehrabad Airport on July 29th, 1980. But that isn't all the book is. It is a memoir of a section of my life from basically 1971 to 1980 when I lived in Iran. And it was a challenging and exciting and rich period of my life. And I just had so many stories streaming around in my head, and I wanted to make sense of them. And I wanted to see what that experience how that experience in Iran had shaped my life. And I also wanted to write a book about Iran that would show Iranians in a different light, different from the way they're portrayed in the Western media. So, as I said, the book begins in Mehrebad Airport when we had decided to leave Iran after living there for 8 years. And we had told ourselves that, in 1980, that we would stay until the government instituted mandatory hijab. And it did. And so we started making arrangements to leave the country. I'm going to read about halfway through the first chapter. It'll give you an idea of who we are and what we were thinking at the time. We arrive at Mehrebad Airport a little after 4 a.m. We'll meet Essie and Julie there, our friends, then travel on separate planes to Zurich, Switzerland. We'll need to pick up our Iranian passports at the airport police station. Travelers leaving the country are required to submit their passports to the airlines 48 hours ahead of departure. The airlines turn them over to the airport police, who then check to see if any holds have been placed on the documents. We have our Swiss Air tickets to Zurich, but our American Airlines tickets to Washington, D.C. will be waiting for us on the plane. The Swiss embassy has finessed that. But first, our bags must be inspected. After 9 years in a country, what do you take with you when you were allowed only one bag? Well, if the country is the Islamic Republic of Iran, you certainly don't take money, gold, or valuable supplies, valuable antiques. We'd seen too many nightly news broadcasts featuring people caught spiriting valuables, their own possessions, out of the country. The culprits stared sheepishly into the television lights as the camera panned over the loot, elaborate gold jewelry, candelabras, stacks of foreign currency. These so-called enemies of the state were then led away to jail to await trial. Officially, no one was executed for trying to go ahead to abscond with his own valuables, but the regime was busy cleaning house. Our German friend Christa, who lived in the village of Evin in the foothills just north of Tehran, told us of lying in bed at night, hearing the executioners' rifle shots ringing out from nearby Evin prison. In news photographs, the hapless men had all the same wry, ironic look of resignation. Rumpled and unshaven, they sat alone in their stark cells and stared half smiling at the camera lens, as if remembering long ago family gatherings when they had joked with the photographer. Wait, Mr. Photo, let me put on some cologne first. Please, just one more, Mr. Photo. So we were careful. Not that we had much in the way of elaborate gold jewelry or other questionable booty, but we took the line of least resistance and packed family photographs and too many soon-to-be outgrown children's clothes, my wedding dress, and audio tapes of Iranian classical and 70s American pop music. Ali packed his chromosomes, well, pictures of them at least. Tucked in among the reprints of scientific articles he had published over the previous 10 years were the tangible articles he had published tucked in among the reprints of scientific articles he had published over the previous 10 years were the tangible evidence of his work. Stacks of 8 by 10-inch black and white glossies of safflower, sunflower, saffron, and cumin chromosomes in various stages of cell division, coming together and separating like courtly dancers in some cellular gavotte. However, as cautious as our packing strategy was, even we tempted fate a little. We were allowed to take only $500 per adult, a sum that would diminish quickly in Zurich, one of the most expensive cities in Europe. Before we left the apartment that morning, Ali carefully folded 2 $100 bills and put them in the toe of my right shoe. It is 6:30 in the morning, and we find the line for the baggage checkpoint. As we watch the security personnel rifle through the bags of sleepy travelers in front of us, we grow increasingly apprehensive. Apart from 2 sweaty $100 bills, we have no contraband. But somehow that doesn't matter. We feel guilty nonetheless. How much longer, Mommy? Asks Samira, who is gripping my hand tightly. Sarah, her arm around my leg, is whimpering softly, only just now realizing that she has neglected to retrieve one of her favorite dolls before we locked up the storeroom. It's finally our turn at the baggage checkpoint. We heave our suitcases onto the inspection table. Without so much as a salam, the bearded official, his collarless shirt buttoned up to his chin, opens each one. I cringe as his calloused hands skim over the lining, dart into side pockets, explore every shoe, and turn over every piece of underwear. You touch those sanitary napkins, buddy, I think to myself, and they're yours. I make a mental note to do laundry at the hotel. Then he finds Ali's chromosomes. Squinting, he turns one of the cell division photographs this way and that, holding it at arm's length. Then his glasses raised to his forehead, slowly bringing it to within an inch of his face. He looks at Ali, and he takes another page from the sheaf of glossies, then another and another. Clearly, he is trying to get some sense of perspective, of scale. Are those Quonset huts in the middle of the desert? They could be aerial shots of, yes, perhaps a military installation. Then he starts pulling negatives out of their translucent paper sleeves, holding them up to the light, peering at rows of root-tip cells looking for all the world like stacks of missiles. They're chromosomes, Ali explains. Huh? Chromosomes, DNA. The baggage checker's eyes narrow. He stuffs the photos and negatives back in their folders, slams shut the last of the suitcases, scrawls a large X on each one with an indelible felt pen, and throws them onto the baggage cart. You can go, he says. His eyes follow us. Yet another Gharbzadeh, West-stricken intellectual university professor, and his American wife preparing to leave the Islamic Republic of Iran. Good riddance. Free of our bags and relieved to have passed that hurdle, we make our way to the airport police station where we find Essie and Julie and their 2 girls in the waiting area. Mona, age 9, is bouncing around on the seat, brushing her yellow ringlets out of her eyes as she relates the plot of a book she has been reading. Ida, age 4, a red-haired, pink-cheeked cream puff, begins flirting with Ali with great success. It is Julie's birthday as well, and she and Samir exchange good wishes. We'll celebrate tonight in Zurich, Julie tells her. We compare notes. Essie has fared less well with the baggage checker. He tells us that when the agent searched his luggage, he got suspicious about some boxes of histological slides and confiscated several prized samples of rat and hedgehog brain tissue. We all regroup in preparation for the next stage of our departure, the retrieval of our Iranian passports. The children are on my passport. Even in the Shah's era, a woman needed her husband's consent each time she wanted to leave the country. However, as soon as we arrived in Tehran in 1971, Ali wrote a letter to the authorities giving me permanent permission to leave the country anytime I wanted. He also made sure to deposit half of his paycheck in my bank account so that I would always have access to funds if he were away. Of course, that permission letter was just insurance. I never wanted to leave the country without him. Julie and I attend to the children as Ali and Essie give all our names to the officer behind the counter. He hands Essie his wife and children's passport and gives the girls and mine to Ali. Then he disappears into an adjoining room to look for Ali and Essie's passports. He comes back empty-handed, except for 2 official-looking envelopes that he hands to them. Ali is very quiet. I move over to the counter and stand next to him as the officer leaves through a huge ledger with neatly handwritten entries. You're on the list, sir, he says to Ali. Okay, that's great, I say. Ali is very pale. He doesn't look at me as he says, That's the Mamnun al-Khuruj list. Mamnun al-Khuruj, exit prohibited. There must be some mistake, Ali says. We have letters from the university allowing us to leave. No, sir, the officer replies, there's no mistake. I cannot move. I cannot hear. The clamor of the airport is just white noise. All around me, people are busily gathering their children, their bags, their last-minute gifts. They head toward the departure lounge, calling out to children to hurry up, negotiating the cumbersome sacks of pistachios and sweets that well-meaning relatives have pressed into their hands at the last minute. I hear nothing, see nothing, except Ali, who in one fluid motion spins away from the counter, opens his briefcase, and begins taking out documents. Okay, here are your passports and the Swiss Air tickets, he says, pressing them into my hand. What do you mean? I asked him. You can't be serious. We can't go without you. You can't stay, he says. You and the girls have to get out of here. But when will I see you again? I ask. I'll join you as soon as I can, he answers impatiently. What's in the envelope? I ask him. Why is this happening? It's a letter from the Prime Minister's office, he explains. Essie and I have to go there now to find out why we're Mamnun al-Khuruj. I'm suddenly aware of Samira and Sarah standing next to us, their eyes filling with tears. Just over Ali's shoulder, I see Essie talking to Julie, her arms folded tightly across her chest, her eyes trained on the floor, listening. Essie comes over to us. Ali John, he says, using the term of endearment for family and close friends. Let's go try to retrieve our luggage and get everyone home. We can sort this out later. Ali puts his hand on Essie's shoulder. Listen, Essie John, he says in measured tones, you and I need to focus on getting our exit visas. It's better for our wives and children to be safely out of here. Give Julie the tickets and put your family on that plane. So we regroup. Julie and her children are taking an earlier flight. We make plans to meet in the Zurich airport. I leave the children with Ali and head across the main concourse to the women's restroom. As I push the door open, I see a large room with a row of sinks and about 10 cubicles along the wall, the usual drab, poorly lit Mehrabad airport restroom. But there are men standing among the women waiting to use the stalls, lots of men, perhaps more men than women. The men glance at me sheepishly as I stand in the doorway. I go out again and check the door sign, sure that in my distress I had made a mistake. But no, it is indeed the women's restroom. Another sign, handwritten and taped to the wall beside the door, announces that due to construction, the men's restroom is unavailable. Please use the women's restroom. So here in the Islamic Republic of Iran, where very soon every woman's modesty will be protected by hijab because the sight of her hair or ankles may arouse men, where male and female university students will be separated, where doctors may not examine patients of the opposite sex. It is acceptable for both sexes to use the same restroom. I decide to wait for Swiss Air. Ali walks us to the checkpoint near the departure lounge. Samira and Sarah are sobbing now, loud, choking sobs. We say goodbye to him and watch as he turns and disappears down the concourse and out into the morning sunlight. I used to enjoy Mehrabad Airport. Mehrabad means place of kindness. Before the children were born, Ali and I would go there sometimes in the evening to drink Nescafe and watch people. Being there made me feel so cosmopolitan, so grown up. I especially loved watching families with their shared features and mannerisms. I would try to figure out their relationships and ethnicities and guess at their professions and destinations. I would sit across from Ali and in the busy airport cafe, grateful for his kindness and for this gift he had given me, the opportunity to know a different culture and a different side of myself, to inhabit two worlds at once. Place of kindness. This morning, Mehrabad had nothing to do with kindness. So that's chapter 1. Now, basically the book has 2 threads. One is obviously figuring out what it was that Ali had done that made him prohibited from leaving the country. And who had made that happen? We had no idea. And which was really terrifying. Secondly, the second thread of the book really is my experiences as an immigrant to Iran, because we went there to live. We went there to live for the rest of our lives. So I also wanted to know what it was that I had missed. What was it that we took for granted? What was it that we hadn't seen that led to this morning in the airport? So that is, I'm going to read you a few chapters that will deal with both of those threads. The first one is just getting to know Ali's family, getting to know the customs. And I'll read a couple more that talk about maybe the winds of change that I really hadn't seen. And then you can have questions later on. Let's see, I'm going to read you a little bit of the chapter called The Low House. This takes place in October of 1971 in Kerman. This is my first visit to Kerman, my first time meeting any of Ali's relatives. When Ali was about to enter 6th grade, he left Kerman for Shar Babak, about 200 inconsistently paved miles away, to keep his homesick sister Fatemeh company. The house he left, his family's home for 16 years, was a large, rambling, U-shaped structure of smooth, light reddish brown brick, with 15 rooms and a veranda with several loggias, all overlooking an expansive courtyard. Baba had designed it himself and overseen the construction. The courtyard had a large pool in the center, surrounded by fruit trees and vegetable plots, carefully tended by a gardener. The domed entrance gate, decorated with plaster friezes, had stairs leading to the roof above one of its wings. In the back, the compound was separated from their neighbors in the Jewish quarter by an ancient adobe wall about 15 feet high and about 5 feet thick, perhaps the vestiges of an old moat that had encircled a much smaller Kerman hundreds of years before. As a teenager, Ali's sister Nazi, dangling her feet in the irrigation ditch, would read popular Persian epic stories to the gardener while he trimmed the trees or weeded the sweet basil and dill. Once in a while, on school days, the gardener would harvest bundles of lettuce and other vegetables and send them along with Nazi so that she could share her family's prosperity and ingratiate herself with her teachers. That was the house of Ali's childhood, but the house to which he returned from Shar Babak 10 months later was very different. This new house, 5 doors down from the vestigial moat from their former home, 5 doors down the vestigial moat from their former home, was the 1/2 the size of the old one and made not of brick but of whitewashed adobe. 2 rooms looked out onto a small unpaved courtyard with only a few fruit trees. Instead of a pool for washing up, there was a spigot under the tree. A flowered chintz curtain separated the small kitchen from the adjoining sitting room. In a corner of the courtyard was a passageway that led to an anbari with a dirt floor. Above that, primitive steps provided access to 3 unfinished rooms, open to the elements except for their dome roofs. Behind the main house, out of sight, like an afterthought, lay 2 other small rooms. The family called this new home Khunei Jar, in Kermani dialect, the Low House, so named because it was almost 15 feet below street level, accessible by rough stone steps. But the name Low House reflected more than just its elevation. It also evoked the family's reduced circumstances. So what had happened was that Ali's father and his uncle, his father's brother, had jointly owned a trucking company. They were the first people to bring trucks, large trucks to Kerman. And over the years, they had a disagreement. Nobody knows if their wives were disagreeing or if they disagreed, but gradually they grew apart. And finally, my father-in-law just gave the whole business to his brother and decided to start his own business, which did not go well. So even jumping ahead here a lot, even with Bibi, that is Ali's mother, Bibi's thrift and spunk and resourcefulness, Baba could no longer make the loan payments. For years, 4 years after he and Ava Amu parted ways, Baba was forced to sell the house he had built. He quickly found a buyer across the old wall in the Jewish quarter, and for many years, Jewish community leaders eager to expand their current school had been eyeing the property. Jewish friends had repeatedly approached Baba, telling him how much it would mean to them to have such a fine house for their students. Baba had resisted, but finally he had no recourse. He sold the house to the school, and as part of the deal, he received the low house in exchange. In the years that followed, it was some consolation to him that the house he had designed, built, and lost had found a new life as a Jewish school, Madraseh Ganjeh Donesh, the Trove of Knowledge School. On our second day in Kerman, we all were invited to lunch at the Low House, where Ali's eldest sister Sakine lived with 4 of her 5 children. Baba had gone ahead to help Sakine get ready for us. When we arrived, he was waiting for us in the garden, the same garden in which he had so gruffly received the news of Ali's Robin Hood bike 14 years earlier, when my husband was given a Robin Hood bike as a prize for being first student. A beaming Sakine greeted us, thrilled to be welcoming Ali back to the family home. The atmosphere was festive as one by one the relatives arrived, the same people who had been at Reza and Puran's house the day before. Chadors were flung aside, kisses and tarofs were exchanged, and children were released into the garden. Puran made sure her little boys peeled off their good outside trousers to reveal their pyjama underneath, the simple drawstring house pants men and boys would change into as soon as they got home. Habib, Sakine's eldest son, ran to get a pair for Ali so that he too would be comfortable sitting cross-legged on the floor. We sat down on the Kermani carpet, leaning against stacks of embroidered cushions that protected us from the chill of the thick adobe walls. With someone's chador thrown over my legs, I struggled to sit cross-legged, but soon gave that up. Tea appeared immediately, a tray of tiny esticons and delicate silver holders. The sofre, or tablecloth, spread on the sitting room floor held platters heaped with fresh fruit, bowls of roasted seeds and nuts, and mascati, or Turkish delight, squares of sweet gelatin candies laden with pistachios and dusted with powdered sugar. There were dates from Bam in the southern part of Kerman province, and homemade kolompe, a local delicacy. This small round pastry was made with wheat malt and whole wheat flour, filled with a paste of dates, walnuts, spices, and stamped with a floral design. After tea, Ali and I took a walk around the garden. From his descriptions, the house appeared to have changed little in the 18 years since the family had lived there. The 3 upper rooms remained unfinished. The courtyard was still without a pool, the house without indoor plumbing. Before making the trek up the stone steps to the outdoor privy at the far end of the courtyard, it was wise to make sure the plastic water pitcher was full. In the middle of the garden, Batul and Fakhri, Sakine's teenage daughters, crouched near the only spigot, washing dishes in a basin with a handful of date palm fibers. A Kermani dish rag, Batul explained with a wry laugh. In the shade of the pomegranate tree, hugging the courtyard wall, stood a weathered wooden bed with sturdy planks surrounded on 3 sides by smooth, gently undulated railing. It was the kind of bed I had seen at old tea houses in the villages north of Tehran, with carpets and cushions and water pipes. But this one was unadorned. It was half of what had been until 7 years before Baba and Bibi's bed. Baba's half of the bed remained inside in the house where he slept. I stood by the bed, my hands on the silky wood of the railing, my mind filled with half-formed imaginings of Ali's mother, of the children she had given birth to there, what her last moments might have been like, who would have been with her, Suddenly, Baba appeared beside me and motioned for me to come with him. Ali and I followed as he disappeared into Anbari. Standing in the doorway, we watched as he poked around, weaving in and out of the single shaft of sunlight that cut diagonally across the dark, fusty room. Finally, he found what he was looking for, a large, bulky object wrapped in a burlap sack. Baba stepped out into the sunlight and handed the stack to me. Beraye Shoma, he said, for you. The sack slipped away to reveal heavy brass samovar, dulled with age, but solidly elegant. In its surface had long ago relinquished its sheen to a light brown patina. Ah, Ali exclaimed softly, a smile of recognition spreading across his face. Resting on a square-footed base, the samovar was about 18 inches tall and about as big around as the widest part of its 12-faceted bowl. The top of its lid formed a pierced socket where a china teapot would nestle, warmed by a cylinder full of hot charcoal inside. All the samovars I had seen in Tehran and Kerman were shiny chrome electric imports from Germany or Japan. Clearly, this one was special. It's very old, said Ali. Look at the date on the lid. Leaning closer, I was able to make out tiny Cyrillic letters and a date, 1870. It's been in the family for as long as I can remember, explained Ali. Baba must have brought this home in the 1920s or 30s after one of his trips to Mashhad. Not far from the Turkmenistan border, Mashhad was a source of many Russian imports. Black wool shawls with fat red roses, Turkmen carpets, Moskva cameras, and of course, samovars. Lifting the lid, I saw that Kerman's hard water had encrusted the samovar's innards with a stucco-like deposit of calcium. It's missing the spigot handle, Baba said apologetically. It doesn't matter, I said, it's beautiful, thank you. I'm honored to have it. No one had ever given me anything like this before. No one had ever entrusted me with a family heirloom. I certainly hadn't grown up surrounded by heirlooms. I was raised in spare, pared-down mid-century California tract homes, far away from my parents' Pennsylvania roots. The occasional curlicues on a wooden fascia board or fake shutters on front windows were the only nods to an architectural past, more early Disneyland than early American. In 1952, our family left the tiny shingle-covered log cabin across the road from Aunt Shirley's house, where my father grew up, the house with the oak furniture and the family Bible and Uncle Dan's wooden leg in the attic, down the road and around the corner from Aunt May's house with the patchwork quilts and the family china and the 200-year-old spinning wheel. When we left Elwood City, all our meager belongings could fit into a small U-Haul trailer, pulled across country by a Chevy coupe to Seattle, then 2 years later to inland Southern California. We were isolated not just from relatives, but from the comforting continuity of family objects passed down through generations. Ours was an acrylic carpeted, melamined, formica'd, linoleumed existence. We amassed old newspapers and magazines. We squirreled away glass jars and plastic milk jugs. We made room for ungainly ceramic lamps from the thrift store, but not for family heirlooms. All the wrong things piled up. While my father had a suppressed appreciation for antiques and art, my mother's professed disdain for material possessions set the tone in our household. Things are not important to me, she would declare. As for me, I like things, especially those that had a story, those that resonated with the rhythms of past lives. And this samovar resonated. This samovar had chased the sleep from the family at thousands of breakfasts, offered solace on cold winter nights, welcomed hundreds upon hundreds of guests, broken the fast during Ramadan, sealed business deals, and witnessed marriage contracts. Now it was going to travel to a bare, modern apartment in Tehran and sit on a cold, uncarpeted floor until its new owners could afford to put furniture under it. But it wouldn't be lonely for long. Things would pile up, as they inevitably do, both the right things and the wrong things. After Ali and I returned to Tehran, Baba worried about that spigot handle. He continued to rummage in the Anbari, hefting decades worth of vinegar jugs and pickle jars and spare machine parts until he uncovered it. He came to visit us in Tehran a few weeks later, and before even taking off his coat, he pulled from his pocket the errant handle, a tapered filigreed stopper, and slipped it neatly into the spigot. The samovar would eventually come to rest on a tall tambour chest from an antique store on Lalazar Avenue, surrounded by brass trays and terracotta water jugs, Hamadan pottery, lush Kermani embroidery, and Turkmen cushions. But it was the samovar I loved best. It was my first tangible link to a past that I was hungry to know more about, and to a family and culture that I yearned to be part of. For you, Baba had said. And in saying that, he had said, you were one of us. So that's my first foray into meeting the Estilai family, and it was lovely. They were very kind and very supportive. I'm going to read another chapter that takes place in Kerma, but this one has more of a sense of what was going on in the country at the time. Let's see where I will begin. Oh yeah, okay, this is a short chapter. Those first days in Kerman, I was continuously on display. At dinner parties, I was fussed over and coddled. Much was made of my attempts at rudimentary Persian. How cute. Or my long hair, just like Iranian women. The family, eager to know me and ensure my comfort, was genuinely interested in my reactions to even the most inconsequential occurrences. And Ali was kept busy translating my every response. Does Ellen like yogurt? Then why isn't she eating any? Doesn't she like sugar with her tea? Then how come she takes only 1 cube? What does she think of the chador? How does she like, fill in the blank, sitting on the floor, Iranian food, sleeping on the floor in the same room with so many people? So one afternoon, after our siesta, yearning for some time out of the spotlight, I found a quiet place where I wouldn't have to have an opinion. I settled into some cushions at the back of the hall, where all 5 of Reza and Puran's children, aged 4 to 9, were watching the cartoons on television. Besides the few cushions, the room was bare except for a red and blue flowered Kermani carpet that skirted the edges of the thick whitewashed walls, and the television, a large console placed at the far end of the room, opposite the door leading to the courtyard. A single naked bulb hung from the vaulted ceiling, sitting in a half circle on the floor in front of me. The children shyly acknowledged my presence before returning their attention to the screen. Programming on the 2 state-run channels was limited to a few hours a day, mostly in the late afternoon and evening. Large portions of the daily newscasts were devoted to the comings and goings of the glamorous royal family. In addition to Iranian sitcoms and variety shows, the government imported American programs like Star Trek, Bonanza, Peyton Place, Perry Mason, and Mission Impossible. Milky black and white reruns of the soap operas Days of Our Lives, several years old and dubbed into Persian, were popular primetime fare. As dull as it was, Days of Our Lives provided me with many random but potentially useful phrases, such as Mickey arime, Mickey is sterile, that I would mumble to myself until I got them right. But my favorite source for new Persian vocabulary was the endless stream of television commercials, to which I accorded the same respect and attention as the programs they were sponsoring. Mine was a natural reaction to a compelling medium. In 1969, the creators of Sesame Street revolutionized children's programming when they adapted the format of television commercials to teach letters and numbers. They recognized that commercials are the perfect vehicle for language acquisition. With their catchy, repetitive jingles and concentrated messages tailored to short attention spans, they engage the learner, be it a preschooler just beginning to talk, or an adult immigrant eager to master the idioms of her new language. Hanging on every syllable, attuned to every nuance of intonation or gesture, I was the advertiser's ideal audience. Big pens, Toshiba rice cookers, Piff Puff insect repellent, Bah Bah air freshener. I could have been a credible spokesperson for any one of them. Random bits of hype lodged in my brain and found their way into my conversations at odd moments. Sauce sandwich, I proudly announced one day as I handed Ali a sandwich slathered with Yeko special sandwich sauce. When a clearly surprised Ali abandoned his sandwich to give me a congratulatory kiss, I knew I was onto something. I found that television commercials were also great bellwethers of social change. As much as I loved Iranian art and history, folk culture and handicrafts, I was intrigued when I saw East and West bump up against one another. Elaborate Louis XV furniture in the sitting room of an otherwise traditional home. Melamine dishes with ancient designs. A portrait of John F. Kennedy rendered in Persian carpet. And cabarets featuring belly dancing and bottles of Johnny Walker on the tables, frequented by families with women in Western-style dress, as well as chadors. Sometimes, these cultural collisions had unsettling effects. Never was that more apparent than in the ubiquitous commercial for Shaw Lorenz televisions. I had seen it several times a day in the few weeks we had been in Tehran, and there it was again, that day in Reza and Puran's living room. The children were as entranced as I was, even though they must have seen it hundreds of times. The ad featured a middle-aged man and his attractive, much younger wife. He was the classic Jahel, a member of the urban lower classes and a staple of Iranian popular culture, a distant cousin of the rural American redneck. While the word Jahel translates as ignorant, the Jahel himself is frequently thought of as the salt of the earth, generous and friendly and endearingly uncomplicated innocent. The paunchy and mustachioed husband was dressed in a black suit with a white shirt open at the collar and a too small black hat perched on his balding head. His wife, clad not in the traditional chador but in a dressing gown, sported a bouffant hairdo and fashionably feline eye makeup. In a sing-song rhyme with a heavy Esfahani accent, she berated her husband for not providing her with enough entertainment. Didn't you say that you would take me to the beach? Take me here and there? Just as she said, take me to the beach, she flung open her dressing gown to reveal a two-piece swimsuit. Immediately, the 5 little heads in front of me whipped around, and 5 pairs of big brown eyes locked with mine. Those eyes told me that once again they wanted to know exactly what I thought. I smiled at them, surprised by this sudden attention. Seeing that I wasn't shocked, they just as quickly turned back to the TV. Still, I wasn't exactly sure what I thought about that commercial. I wasn't shocked, but I was perplexed. Clearly, the husband had his hands full with that woman. Playing upon the time-honored international stereotype of the materialistic, nagging wife, the ad seemed to suggest that buying her a television would make her forget all about an expensive trip to the seaside and skimpy underwear. In fact, in his Esfahani accent, the husband tells her, somebody who has a husband, has children, doesn't go here and there, doesn't go to the beach. If our Esfahan is half the world, Shah Lorenz itself is the whole world. And I forgot to mention to those who don't speak Farsi that in Iran, Iranians speak of the beloved city of Esfahan. It used to be the capital of the country and is a center of art and culture. They speak of it as half the world. Esfahan nesf jahan. Esfahan is half the world. Sorry for not telling you that in the beginning. But who was the audience for this message? What did the average Iranian think of it? And who was the average Iranian anyway? Was this swimsuit really a sign that Iranians had become so westernized that this commercial was acceptable to the masses? Or were they scandalized by it? And did they really want the whole world? The commercial had been airing for several months, but it was still provocative, especially to these children who had never seen any of their relatives in a swimsuit. It had been almost 36 years since the late Reza Shah, the founder of the Pahlavi dynasty and the current Shah's father, had outlawed wearing the chador and headscarves in public. This edict, brutally enforced by the police, was intended to speed the country's modernization. In the late 1930s, women venturing out wearing hijab were attacked and their offensive coverings were confiscated. The chador was now optional. After the Allies engineered the abdication of his father in 1941, Mohammad Reza Shah allowed women to once again take up the chador. But 30 years later, my sister-in-law, Puran, like millions of Iranian women, would never leave the house without one, let alone wear a swimsuit, even at home. Certainly, most Iranian women did not aspire to be that woman in the skimpy suit. They may have wanted her television set, but not her swimwear. The Jahel, like millions of his traditionally minded countrymen, was caught in a conundrum. By allowing television into his living room, he was affording his family cheap entertainment within the safe confines of his home. But he was also opening the door to a host of foreign influences, both positive and negative, that undermined his control. He would forego the seaside only to be inundated by a tidal wave of unfamiliar attitudes, fashions, and moral ambiguities. Iranians had a long history of adapting to foreign conquests and influences while maintaining ancient customs. Years later, with this in mind, one of Ali's colleagues at the Institute would point to an Iranian travel poster on the wall of the faculty lounge. "Welcoming visitors for 2,500 years, proclaimed the poster. Yes, the colleague laughingly agreed. Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, the Arab hordes, we welcomed them all. And they had survived them all, in part because of an ability to live and let live, to embrace the positive aspects of a new culture and ignore the bad. Since the Industrial Revolution, Iranians had mimicked the West in commerce and education, using sexy bathing suits to sell German televisions to conserve their chadoris was just one more seemingly pragmatic accommodation. I found the cross-cultural pollination of 1970s Iran a charming and reassuring sign of an inevitable surge toward modernity, but I was unaware of the depth of the growing discontent among traditional and devoutly religious conservatives. I brushed aside fleeting glimpses of social and religious resistance. Jahels staring gape-mouthed at me because I dared to go without hijab, or the wife of my husband's friend who objected to paying for an American guest's wine at the restaurant. This intransigence will work itself out, I told myself. This has nothing to do with me. But 9 years later, the beaches at the Caspian seaside resorts would be segregated. On their side of long dividing curtains, women would swim in street clothes and chadors. Bathing suits would become only one of many casualties of the culture wars that were just now escalating. So, yeah, there was a kind of bubble that we lived in, I think. Although we had friends and relatives and from all walks of life and from all over the country, still, I think there was a reluctance to see how much resistance there was brewing in the country. I'm going to, if it's okay with you, Qudsi Khanum, I'm going to read just one more. It's about.
Of course.
Okay, it's about 9 minutes, and then.
No problem.
Okay, then we'll take a little break. This chapter is titled Wind Catchers, Flag Catchers. Tehran, 1977 to 78. In late 1977, almost 2 years before the Iranian Revolution, I completed my master's degree in English literature at Tehran University. A few months later, I was hired at the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art as manager of educational services. The museum, a project of Empress Farah, had opened a month or so earlier to great fanfare, both for its exquisite architecture and for its spectacular collection of European, American, and Iranian modern art. It soon became a new center for contemporary Iranian artifacts, but what some welcomed as progress, others saw as a threat. The Empress had hired her cousin, architect Kamran Diba, to design the building, which abounded with references to traditional Persian architectural forms, especially the badgir, or wind catcher. Traditional badgirs, which I had seen in the desert town of Yazd, channeled breezes down into the house where they were cooled by an indoor pool. But here they were transformed into light catchers that helped illuminate the galleries. A central ramp of gleaming polished concrete wound down through the center of the museum and ended in a lower level atrium with a hose, a rectangular reflecting pool, not of water, but of oil. Diba had commissioned this black pool, called Matter and Mind, by Japanese artist Noriyuki Haraguchi for the new museum, in an obvious reference not only to the hose of traditional Iranian architecture, but also to the oil that fueled Iran's economy and ultimately funded the museum. David Galloway, the museum's first curator, was an American art critic based in Germany who had been tapped by the Empress to help build the museum's collection and organize major shows of European and American art. The Empress charged Americans Galloway and Donna Stein and Diba, who was also the museum's first director, with putting the collection together. In a few months, they amassed what would become the largest collection of late 19th and 20th century Western art outside the West, with impressive works representative of the major art movements. The museum's 5,000 square meters also afforded generous space to Iranian artists such as Nasser Ovisi, Parviz Tanavoli, and Parviz Kalantari. But while the architecture was informed by traditional Iran, the collection was predominantly Western. I loved working in that building with its spiraling rhythm, its light, its energy. Each day, I sailed up and down the winding ramp, making friends with the Van Goghs, the Giacomettis, the Picassos, and Warhols. I took restorative breaks in the galleries or wandered in the sculpture garden outside my office window. I felt lucky to work in a museum where two cultures coexisted so amicably, or so I thought. I answered a phone call one day from an Iranian woman who wanted some information about current exhibits. Before hanging up, she asked, "Is this a museum for foreigners?" "Oh, not at all," I assured her. "It's for Iranians. Manzel Khodetun. This is your house." The museum did belong to the people, but in reality, it housed two cultures existing side by side. It was not just a matter of Iranian artists sharing space on the walls with their European and American counterparts. It was also the museum's Western-educated administrative and curatorial staff working among the more traditional and religious support staff. Soon I would see that for those in the latter group, the museum in its current form would never be their house. In the early summer of 1978, I was helping organize a reception at the museum that would feature the Danish ambassador. As did all our receptions, this one would include alcohol. In fact, beer and wine had always been available in the museum's cafeteria. Weeks before the event, I made sure that two of the women who worked in the cafeteria would be on hand to help serve at the reception. But just a few hours before the guests were to arrive, one of these ladies asked to speak to me. "Khanum Estilai," she whispered, nervously adjusting her headscarf. "I'm willing to work tonight, but I can't serve alcohol." Why not? I asked. My son has forbidden it, she explained. I don't understand. You've been serving beer and wine in the cafeteria all these months. Yes, I know, but my son won't let me do that anymore. Oh, and my friend won't be serving alcohol either. I looked over at her friend, also wearing a headscarf, standing off to the side and watching this exchange. Both women were polite and respectful as always, but now they were displaying a newfound power and resolve. Clearly, in their minds, they had just scored a small victory for Islam over the infidels at the museum. I knew that it was pointless to argue with them. No reasoning about the lateness of the hour would dissuade them from upholding their Islamic principles. I thanked them for letting me know their position and quickly set about finding others to take their places. This defection had caught me off guard. I could no longer assume a benign disinterest on the part of the janitors, guards, and support staff. They were watching and judging and making choices. Suddenly, I saw the museum from their perspective. The provocative images, the hijab female employees, the nodding to architectural traditions while dismissing others. A place that's seemingly at odds with their values and culture. My temporary staffing problem would soon prove to be a harbinger of more dissatisfaction to come. A few weeks later, another event occurred that made me see just how myopic we all had been. Sometime in 1978, before he returned to Germany, David Galloway had produced a rich and innovative catalog to accompany a large show of cutting-edge contemporary art, the Book of the Art of Artist Books. Hundreds of copies of the thick catalog were produced in Germany at considerable expense. Shortly after the catalogs arrived, my boss, an American in his mid-50s, burst into my office, red-faced, frenetic, and brandishing a mat knife. "Where's your copy of the new catalog?" he demanded. "It's not here. I took it home to read." "Well, I need it back," he shouted. "Now." "Okay, but why?" "Just look," he said, as he opened his copy and thrust it in my face. I stared at it for a second, horrified, and then burst out laughing. There, in the middle of the book, low on the page near the inner margin, was a small black and white photograph of two men engaging in oral sex. "Whose idea was this?" I asked. "What were they thinking?" "I don't know," he replied, "but I need to cut out all these pages, hundreds of them." He snatched back his copy and, clutching his mat knife, disappeared in search of the rest of the offending pages. I don't know if the photo was the choice of Galloway or his graphic designer, whether the curator had seen it or if it was simply someone else's last-minute addition to the layout. But clearly its inclusion indicated someone's ignorance of the prevailing mores of the country, or at least the inability to understand that these mores were relevant to this museum. Outside of a small group of avant-garde intellectuals and aesthetes in major international centers of art, where would this catalog photograph have been acceptable? Most likely not in many government-sponsored museums around the world, and certainly not in Iran. The public never saw the offending page, but as it turned out, there was still much in the museum that wasn't acceptable to a growing number of dissatisfied and disaffected Iranians. Later that fall, one of the museum staff found a note stuck in the frame of Tom Wesselman's Great American Nude, a painting of a big, blousy blonde whose most predominant feature was bright pink nipples. The note said, "Next time, this will be a bomb." So that's
Wow.
that. Oh, I
Wow.
think we
That-
kind of
that-
used up our hour, didn't we? Okay.
oh, wow. I read this book a few months ago when we talked, and when you read it, it's totally different story. I mean, it just sinks in. And what an interesting lady you are. I mean, Dr. Graham, you keep telling me, but you adopted another country and culture, and you loved it. Samovar, terme, this, that, and went to school, taught, and actually your two daughters were born in Iran.
Yes, they were. Yes.
And your um, husband didn't want to have a green card because you want to be in Iran, you want to live in Iran.
Right, we didn't think we needed one. We were so naive.
It was, anyway, it was wonderful. So should we show the slides now, or we go to Dr. Gerami? What do you like to do, Ellen John?
Well, I know that Dr. Garami wants me to say a few words about each of the slides, but
Oh,
Me, well, first of all, should I show the slides or you will show it? I'm not sure.
who, me? Are you talking?
I do have it here, Dr. Madani. If you
No,
want me to show the photos, then you will give me the share screen. It's up to you. I don't know.
you have the share screen.
I
Because-
have? Yes, yes, I have.
Yes, because I talked to Ellen John yesterday, and then I thought that you know that. And then if you're going to talk about every photo, then I don't play the music, but whatever.
Actually, we should have made the arrangements before, but actually, I think I show the photos and Ellen should talk a few words about each photo. I mean, I don't know how to explain them, but Ellen knows how to. So first of all, let me
Of
start
course,
with the
but,
first.
My impression, I apologize, my impression was that you two talked yesterday.
We did. We keep changing our minds.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. Well,
No,
just a second, please, just a second. Share the screen here. Then where is it? Yes. Do you see this now?
Yes, yes.
yes.
Okay. Now,
Right.
I put it on a slideshow, and
Yeah.
the only thing that I can say, and I do not go farther than that, this beautiful picture is Ellen and my 60-year-old Ali. I don't mean that he's 60 but the friendship is 60-year-old. Yes.
Yeah.
Especially this year, this month, June. Yes. So from now on, Ellen, please say a few words about each one. You tell us, for example, where you are in this picture, and then you tell me next, and then I go to the next one.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much for doing this. Yes, we were in Davis. This is before we were married. And we were at a picnic, a Persian picnic, I think. And this is near Lake Berryessa, I think, in Davis. One of my favorite pictures. A
Okay.
happy. Next slide.
Next. Yeah, next. Okay,
Next.
tell me next. Okay.
Oh, and this is our wedding. And it was in the Botanic Gardens of UC Davis. That was the gazebo, and the gardens had just opened. I think we were maybe the second wedding that was ever held there. And I don't know if my friend Katie Black is here tonight. She was thinking of coming, but she made the dress that I was wearing. And our dear friend Farouk Khalaf he was the best man, and he was also organizing the whole wedding was done by our friends. And I talk about that in the book. The cooking, everything, music, it was fabulous. Next.
As you know, I lived for 10 years in Davis, and this is the place that Iranians go for Size Bedar.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, this is Sakine Khanum, my eldest sister-in-law, and she's a hero in my life. She was sort of like a mother to me. My mother was in the States when I had my children. And so Sakine said to me that, you don't have a mother here. So I'm going to come 1 month before and 1 month after you deliver the baby, and I'll just help you with everything. And she did. She was amazing. And this is her giving our daughter Samira, our eldest daughter Samira, a bath. And I am watching because I am too afraid to do it myself. Yes, she was a hero to me.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Yeah.
And this is Baba in the center there, Ali's father, and Sakine again, and little Samira in the living room we were living in Kuyegisha at that time. Next. Oh, this is a beautiful building in Kerman. It was originally a textile factory, but it's now a library. It's so beautiful. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see us in front of it. We couldn't go inside. I think it was closed that day, but there we are in our 2006 visit to Kerman. And so left to right is Ali's nephew and me, Ali's nephew Mansour, me and Reza, Ali's elder brother, our older daughter Samira, Ali, and Minu, Ali's niece, and Sarah, our second daughter. Next slide. I just want to say that, you know, it's so beautiful to see. That was a factory when you think about it. I mean, who makes factories so beautiful anymore? It's just amazing. And this is, again, I think this was in 2008 when we went back the second time. We went back after the girls and I after 23 years. So it was really something. These are all Ali's brothers and sisters. Sadly, most everybody is passed away, but Sakine is in black on the right, and his brother Ahmad, and sister Nazi, Ali, Fatima, and her husband Asghar. And my little brother-in-law at the top there is Ghasem, who figures prominently in the book, and Reza, the elder brother. And down, two sisters-in-law down here in the front. So next. Oh yes, this is
Just second. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. This is Ghasem in 1971 when we stopped by his village. I'm trying to, I can't remember right now where it was. This is terrible. I'll think of it. But he was in Sepoy Danesh, and this is his class. Next. Oh, there's a chapter in the book when I talk about Samira's school. And it's a chapter called The Year of Teaching Dangerously, I think. No, that's a different one.
Which one is Samira?
Samira is in the red pants with no rupush, with no uniform, because her mother had forgotten to wash her 2 uniforms. And so I had to send her to school that way with her sweater buttoned. It was like horrible. And every time I look at this photograph, I feel so guilty that I sent that little girl, that sweet little girl, to school that way. But these are just some of the classmates with their first grade teacher. You see Kelasa Aval written there. And I had visited the classroom once. Ali and I went to talk to the teacher because I wanted to see where my daughter went to school every day. She'd come home every day with her rupush, just with her school uniform, just filthy. And so I wanted to know why. And so I, went up these stairs to the classroom and I asked the teacher if I could visit. And she said, well, why? Why do you want to do that? And I said, well, because I want to see where she's learning every day. And as I walked up the stairway, I saw the walls of the school were really, really dirty, the walls of the stairway. I could just imagine Samira on a crowded stairway, brushing against the walls, getting her uniform dirty every day. So I went into the classroom and I saw that there was really nothing there. There was a chalkboard, and I think that was it. There were just rows of seats. So I asked the teacher if there was anything she needed, because I was used to American schools where parents volunteered or they would fundraise or they would, donate things to the classroom. And she says, no, we don't need anything. So I thought, well, okay, that's fine. And there's more about that, there was an attempt to start a parent-teacher association at that school, and it went awry. So if you read the book, you'll know more about that. Next slide.
This is the last slide.
Yes, okay, that's good. Thank you. Thanks for doing that.
No, tell us about this, please.
Oh, this slide. This is the postcard for or the graphic for the launch of my book. The launch of Exit Prohibited on October, I guess it was, I can't read that, October 19th. The book was published on October 15th, and we had a big party. Joy Shmakali, it was really, really nice. A lot of, we had a samovar, and we had tea and pastries and wine and other good stuff. And it was really, really nice. And it was held at a center for civil rights in Riverside. Thank you so
For
much.
me,